time. Get in there, go to the theaters, watch it. I believe it's just in theaters right now, but should come out soon, I'm sure. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to our CCS Cinema Club podcast, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
We are on the campus of Fort Hays. We are welcoming back our 45,000 families to the new school year for our annual Back to School Fair.
We are coming together to support our students returning back to school, ensuring that they have all the supplies and resources to start their first day,
And providing them with a one-stop shop.
Making sure that they can start this school year off right and strong, ready for success.
There are over 100 community partners here today providing resources to our families. Our students can pick up their school supplies, backpacks.
NBC4, we always say we are local for you, and we really mean it. I mean, most of our folks in our newsroom, on air and behind the scenes, are from Central Ohio. I mean, I'm a CCS kid. We know how important it is for kids to have that strong foundation to get their school year started.
We know kids need two things to be ready to learn. They have to be healthy and able to come to school with everything they need. So we're partnering closely with the district.
We wanted to bring them back with a lot of fun things to do from a sports perspective. So we've got our tree house out here. We got our Center Without Walls, as well as our soccer pit. So we're happy to bring the sports back to the resource fair.
Introducing them to our bucket truck, providing those rides to the children. And some of the children, what they even said is, of course, they have fun when they take that ride, but more importantly, that they want to become a line worker someday.
This is community. We are one community. We're all working together to make sure that our kids have the best year possible. It's always so exciting at the start of a school year.
It's just a great feeling. There's a buzz, there's an excitement. Everyone's psyched for school to start.
Being able to see the smiling faces, it just really brings a joy to my heart.
It's really important for kids to show up day one of school so that they are welcome, they get to meet their classmates, their teacher, and just really celebrate the fact that they're, back and that we're ready for a good school year.
Get into that back to school routine now.
School comes at you fast, and my recommendation to kids as they're getting back to school is really to take it easy, take it slow. It's nerve-wracking for everyone.
I think the most memorable interactions that I've had thus far are seeing our seniors come out to get their school supplies. Oftentimes we find out that seniors can have that senioritis, they can have that summer slip, but I've seen seniors from Briggs High School, from Walnut Ridge High School, here bright and early to get their school supplies. They're excited for their senior year, so let's cheer them on from the first day of school till they cross that graduation stage.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Good evening.
Today is September 11th, and after we call the roll, I do want to take just a brief moment of silence. This is the Equitable and Transparent Resource Management Committee meeting, and I am calling it to order. Can we please call the roll? Oh, Mr. Williams is not in here.
He was.
Whoops. Well, we'll do our moment of silence right now to remember in remembrance of September 11th. Thank you. We will wait for Mr. Williams. I just got so excited to start the meeting, I didn't make sure that. Will you do it?
Will do.
Okay, perfect.
Ms. Adair.
Present.
Mr. Cole. Ms. Ingalls.
Present.
Pedro Mejia.
Present.
Cynthia Price.
Present.
Keisha Upchurch. Kiyoshana LeCount
Very good.
Bureau. Thank you. You have a quorum.
Thank you. So welcome everybody to our meeting. We do have a lot of items to discuss. The first thing I do want to say is that at our last board meeting, President Vera sent some work into our committee, which is, I'm sure, the first of many times that will happen. But I wanted to publicly acknowledge that, that we have accepted the assignment to review administrative properties, specifically this property we're in today, 270 East State Street, per the facility task force recommendations. We are not going to be talking about that tonight. I will come back to the committee with additional information and the way we're going to be working through that. Some of this will be tying into the integrated real estate planning that our COO, Mr. Woods, is working on, that we will talk about later in the year. But we will talk more about how that work is going to unfold, probably next meeting, to kind of give you details and just some timelines. We're going to be doing some internal work on that to get it set up first. All right, so our first and only action item this evening is to approve the minutes from our last meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, and without objection, the minutes will be approved. All right, so we, tonight, as promised, we are going to start to talk about our property and maybe debunk some rumors out there in the community about what exactly we as a district have that is vacant or unused. And so I've asked the team to kind of walk us through properties that are currently vacant, not used as school properties, or leased. And so that's what's going to happen. So I'm going to turn it over to, actually, no. First I'm going to have us adopt the agenda. I'm really discombobulated
Motion
today.
to adopt the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Without objection, we're going to go ahead and adopt the agenda. Okay. So now, item 4.1. So I'll turn it over to our COO, Mr. Woods, and welcome Alex Trevino as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Chair Adair. We are all about debunking myths. So we're excited to be here today to talk about just a couple of aspects of our big portfolio. Here in the district, we have almost 10 million square feet of facilities, right? Big footprint. Of that, we have academics, 112 schools. We have administrative sites, 14 buildings. We also have some leased and vacant sites. And we have other sites that we're potentially looking at to involve demolitions. Those aren't part of today's discussion, but I phoned a friend, and Mr. Alex Trevino is going to walk us through specifically our leased, unused, and vacant properties. Alex?
Perfect, thank you. So unless you object, I would encourage, if you have questions, to ask him as we go. It's a fairly brief overall presentation, but lots of slides to kind of just drive home all the respective points. So if we can move to next slide. This is just a big picture overview. So of that 9.8 million square feet that Mr. Woods referred to, you can see the vast majority of it is in our academic sites. About 582,000 of it is administrative sites in 14 buildings. 327,000 of it are leased, and there are 354,000 square feet that are vacant. And then acreage, another big number. So over 1,500 acres of land across our entire district. But again, you see there's only 38 of them that are actually vacant. And we'll drill into that detail here as we move through the rest of the presentation. So just to reemphasize, we're looking at the leased, unused, and vacant properties. So the leases actually come in quite a few different flavors. So we broke them down by all the various kind of buckets, types that we have across our system. So there are ground leases. So there are two of those. There's one for the Childhood League, which is at the Fort Hays campus. There's a separate one with the Ohio State University Schoenbaum Center at our Wineland Park Elementary School. Those are both early childhood facilities.
Can you just explain, sorry, when you say ground lease, what that means?
Yeah, great question. So a ground lease is pretty much just like what it sounds like. So the district has entered into a lease with a third party for the ground, and that third party has then made the development. In both of these cases, it is a full new constructed, or in the case of the Childhood League, it's a renovation with major additions. So that third party is responsible for all those improvements, and the district simply maintains ownership of the property and has leased it to that third party. And they're long-term leases, as you might imagine.
I have a question. Do CCS students get the opportunity to engage in any kind of activities at either one of these? Or is it by application? How's that work?
I would not be the content expert for that particular question. I don't know if there's, like, are we allowed to phone friends or?
Disclosure. We're always allowed to phone friends.
Evening, everyone. Catherine Moser, I'm Deputy Superintendent of Academics. So the Childhood League Pre-K Center at Fort Hays does have an application process. I can get back to you, but it's my understanding we do not have set-aside seats in that space. We do have CCS Pre-K students who attend the Schoenbaum Center.
Oh, okay. And that's that application? Or how's that? Neighborhood?
Let me get back to you on the details of that. But we certainly do have CCS students who are attending Schoenbaum. Now, there are other students at Schoenbaum who may not be CCS pre-K students.
And I don't know if it's helpful, but just, again, for more detail. So 2 very different setups where the Schoenbaum Center is a standalone facility. It is completely isolated and discrete from the district's academic facilities versus at Wineland Park. The 2 are literally connected. If you didn't know the difference from the outside, you'd probably think it was just one large building. We actually share a playground space. The district is making, or just made an improvement to the early childhood playground there that we share.
Yeah.
So very cooperative agreement there.
Excellent.
So the district also has 2 leases with Columbus Metropolitan Libraries at present. This is one that's evolved a little bit over time, but right now they lease space at our Linmore Annex. So a little bit later, I'll show you the overall site plan and you'll see exactly what that building is. It's a relatively small portion of that overall campus. And they also have a footprint at our closed Beery Middle School site.
Is that temporary? I'm sorry. Is it temporary, those leased, are those temporary? How are they doing it? Using them as swing spaces?
So let me give you what I know about the details of each. A little bit different. So Linmore is a true swing space. Okay. So they are renovating their Cleveland Avenue branch. I think they call it their North Linden branch. So it is truly their swing space. If I've got the story right at Beery, I believe that was kind of a temporary solution while they were measuring whether there was enough interest and support to sustain a permanent branch, which I believe they've made that decision and they're under construction, and I believe it'll be in next year when that space will be finished, and then they will leave our space. So not always the same, but again, there's a pretty long-standing relationship there. We've done these kinds of agreements with them in the past. The district currently has 2 cell tower leases. Those are at our West High School site and our Indianola Informal K-8 building. And then CCS actually leases 2 different sites for our own communications needs. They are at the same location, that being the Levesque Tower. One is for our WCBE transmitter, and the other one is for our safety and security and transportation radio repeater.
So I just wanted to clarify the last thing that you said. Those are, the CCS antenna leases are leases that exist on somebody else's property that we are leasing space in, as opposed to the other ones that are the other way around. Okay.
Yep, you
got it.
Make
sure I understood.
No, those are the only ones where the district is I'm going to get the words wrong, lessor, lessee. We are paying for somebody else's space. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, no, please.
Don't apologize.
If we can go back to Indianola Informal, that's our property, right?
Correct.
And we're leasing it to someone else?
Correct.
That's prime property. When does the lease run out and who is in there?
So remember, it's not technically for space. In this particular, so these are cell tower leases.
Okay.
So I think where you'll see them most commonly at school sites, you're going to see them on football stadiums. Indianola Informal is a strange site. It has a very tall chimney that is no longer used at the center of the site, and that is where the cell tower is.
Moser, Deputy Superintendent again. I was actually the principal at Indianola during the time that the school moved onto that property. So the cell tower, as Alex described, is completely separate from the school building function. It is literally up on the very top of a very large chimney that isn't otherwise used as part of the school property. It doesn't in any way impact the use of the school building that was renovated on that site.
Yeah, I was wondering, because my daughter went to summer school there a couple of years ago, and it needed renovated, so they finished it finally, right? They finished the renovation, because that downstairs basement.
So this is the building on Weber Road.
Yeah. So they finished the renovation?
I think we might need to make sure we're talking about the same location.
Oh, okay.
Space. I think you have a different building in mind.
Thanks.
All right, so the next category of leases are our triple net leases. So that's the three ends you see there. So we have triple net leases with Junior Achievement. They lease our Second Avenue facility, which is kind of in the Victorian Village area. And then the ESC leases our Glenmont Elementary School, which is in the Clintonville neighborhood.
What does triple net mean?
Yeah, so a triple net lease is one where the lessee is responsible for all costs. So they pay the district for the space. They pay for all the maintenance. They pay all their own utilities. They're responsible for the full cost for that site. So it does essentially offload from the district any financial responsibility.
If I can add, as we go through these, just let's keep in mind that there might be a larger audience than who's in the room. And we just kind of want to make sure that the general public can understand some of the acronyms and terms, if we can keep that in mind.
Yep.
Absolutely.
It's a type of lease where they're responsible for. I mean, that's.
Do you want to restate the question just so we have it?
Are you asking for what the acronym is again?
What is the acronym?
I forgot what it was too, so it's a good question.
So the acronym is a triple net lease.
Triple net.
Like that is the terminology you would actually see spelled out, and it is abbreviated as the three N's.
Okay.
Yep. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
And just, I don't know if anyone has been to the Junior Achievement building now. They have completely renovated it inside. They've added on, and it's amazing. They've actually just finished the second floor where their admin space is. And so they, I think next they want to do things to the outside. So again, this is things that Junior Achievement pays for, those renovations.
Thank you. And so that takes us to our last type of lease, which is a ground lease. And so these have been prevalent for us with Columbus Recreations and Park, or CRPD. So these actually run in both directions. So under the first bullet point, you'll see that at our Burroughs, Walnut Ridge, and Smith Road site, we are leasing property to CRPD. So it is now for their use or for their improvements. So in the case of Burroughs, the city made the improvements to the park at their expense. It functions essentially as a city park, but it still belongs to the ownership of the district, and we have full rights to use it. And then in the case of Linden Park, if you're familiar, the city made a major investment in a new recreation center there. They built a new playground at their expense, and we lease it back, and the district is responsible for the maintenance for it, but it primarily serves our early childhood program that's immediately adjacent. And if you didn't know any different, you would think it was district property. Right. So again, very intentionally, oftentimes our property lines are invisible. Like unless you went to the auditor's website, you would not know where they are. And that's oftentimes very intentional. The public doesn't need to know where one stops and the other one starts. And so then that takes us to our shared use agreements. So while these function very much like leases, it is a different form of agreement. They're a little less formal, and they tend to be, I believe they all exist in existing functioning school buildings, and they are for discrete space within them. And so where they have occurred the most right now has been for our early childhood purposes. So we have those agreements with the CDC Head Start and with the Columbus Early Learning Centers. And then they also exist for our school-based health clinics. And those two providers right now are Nationwide Children's Hospital and Primary One Health. And again, those are at many of our school sites across our system.
Alex, before you move on to the next category, and maybe this is the Treasurer's Office helping you out with this question, what's the fiscal impact of these leases? I know some people think that, or typically a lease agreement, a lot of organizations go into them as a revenue-generating kind of venture. Could you talk to us maybe about our fiscal philosophy currently as it pertains to all of the types of leases that you spoke about?
I can definitely speak to which ones generate revenue in terms of how it gets budgeted expense.
It would go into our general fund. I'm not prepared tonight to do an analysis of that revenue versus expenses, but it would be revenue generating for the district. I don't think it's immaterial to the scope and scale of our budget, but I can't speak to the expenses specifically, but I can certainly get that figure.
And just clarifying question to the chair, is it the general fund for capital improvements, or is it the general fund just for the district as a whole?
General fund separate from permanent improvement.
And when you say immaterial to the scope of our budget, can you maybe say that in a...
Let me translate that to a figure. With a $1.7 billion budget, our revenue is small. I would say, I hate to give you a figure because, again, I don't have it in front of me, but let's say it's $2 million. To us individually, that's a large sum of money, but in perspective of the district's budget, it is very, very small. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Well, we say that's non-restricted funding.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think that's the core idea, at least for me, is one that we understand is unrestricted funding. So it's funding that doesn't necessarily have a direct mandate.
No strings attached.
No strings attached. In business, that's called a profit. So here's that opportunity for us there. If we can in the future learn what the footprint of that actually is, I think that'll be helpful.
I think we need to look at these contracts, look at the expenditures to make sure the district is on the right side of that equation. We need to maximize that revenue moving forward.
Thank you. Alex?
All right. Oops. So now moving to the unused and vacant properties. So here's the total list of all those properties. And I'm not going to read them now because we're going to drill down into each one of them, and I'll give you a little more detail on each. And so we've broken them into two major buckets, those being the inactive sites and then the active sites. So Monroe Middle School is the first of the inactive sites. So there is the front facade of the building. The second slide is kind of the back side of it, and we try to get some good pictures there to make sure you've got some context of where this one is if you're not familiar. So those are the former Sawyer Towers. I think they were most recently called Latitude.
25.
Two numbers. Yeah. Right in the background. So we are immediately adjacent to that development. We are right at that intersection of I-71 and I-670, kind of where it makes that big, large bend. And so in total, this site is 9.1 acres. You can see it's kind of an odd-shaped, kind of an upside-down, backwards L, with the building kind of sitting right at that knuckle of where the property lines come together. And he's...
How long has it been vacant?
So this building was closed in 2014.
Okay.
11 years, 10 years.
Alex, can you talk about the current interior condition of the building?
So I've not been in this one personally for quite a few years. I'm confident it's in pretty rough condition.
It is.
Building roofs do not take care of themselves, and very minimal maintenance going into these facilities. So you can see the lower level windows have all been boarded up. You can imagine the reasons why. The buildings are secured, but obviously we're not spending a lot of money on maintaining buildings that we're not utilizing.
Are there utilities in this one?
I am not positive on this one. Oftentimes, we're going to have water turned off because there's too much risk of freezing. I don't know if the heat's on. Oftentimes, the electric's on so we can maintain security systems. Yes, ma'am.
What discussion, if any, before this, I'm worried about this building. It's a danger to the community there in that area. has anyone ever approached the district about doing something, demolition, putting something else up at any point in time since 2014?
I don't know if I know the specific answer to that. I'm sure there have been many inquiries. I'm not sure of anything solid.
This property, and none of these properties are currently for sale.
Oh, wow.
And so the board has to take action to put property for sale. And so, at least during my time, because we knew that we eventually had to get here to analyze property, made a conscious choice to not do that, because we need to make sure that all property, we're using the best interest of our students first. And as the strategic plans go forward and the academic vision takes shape, we want to make sure we have the assets we need to do that. And so, you know, we haven't put anything up for sale in like 4 years.
No, I think maybe the other piece of information is that when we did our last master plan back in 2016, I'm almost positive that site showed up as a new location for, I forget if it was the girls' school or the boys' school. So there was a point in time where it was contemplated as a different use, I think largely because of the size of the site and because of its location being relatively center city.
Go ahead.
I want to support your comment. I think this is the opportunity, this committee and our future work are the opportunity to have discussion about not only the idea of non-sale, but how we use this to close community gaps. So yes, it's about what's best for our students first, and then secondly, what's best for closing gaps in the community in a way that assists this particular neighborhood even.
Right.
A former church of mine is not but literally a block or so away. So I just wanted to support you with that comment.
That's right.
This is what we're here for.
That's
Which
right.
is a
It goes to
big
our whole
church.
child, what Board Member Cole just said about supporting community. That's one of the guardrails, remember the goals and guardrails around the whole child. So we can look at more than just what's happening in the classroom. We can look at the needs of the
Yeah.
community around to make sure that our students are supported holistically. So this will be the work of this committee at some point. Like, what do we want to do here?
And to that point, and I totally understand if y'all don't have the numbers for this tonight, but when thinking about these properties going forward and what to do with them, I think that it would be helpful to have some sort of idea about what the cost would be to bring it into operable condition. So for, as you said, Alex, this is a property that's been closed for 10 years and has not been particularly maintained because those resources need to go elsewhere. If we're thinking about how to create use for these spaces, then, and thinking about the resources of the system, then it would stand to reason that we probably need to at least consider how much it would cost and whether that cost, whether the return on investment is worth the cost of bringing it up to date.
And I think we will have some of those conversations, not tonight, but as we talk about potential demolition.
Okay.
Yeah. Excellent point. Alex?
All right. That takes us to our next site, which is the Beaumont site. And if that name doesn't ring a bell for you, this site has had many uses over the years. It was originally built as the Beaumont School, but it was most recently, for Columbus City Schools, the site of the Spanish Immersion Academy. So this building went out of use when it was relocated to its current location. Again, you'll notice that the building is fully boarded up.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Was Beaumont being used by Bridgeway Academy? Yeah.
It was, that's correct. So this was our home to Spanish Immersion Academy until 2016, when that new building opened. And then Helping Hands / Bridgeway did lease this site from us as well.
Okay.
If you're not familiar, they now have their own site they've renovated out on the east side. And so I believe they kind of use this as some interim space as they were getting that new space ready. And my notes show that they were there through 2021.
Okay.
So the building's been empty for a couple of years at this point. So I just kind of tried to show you on this one. So this is a little bit smaller site. It's about 5.4 acres. If you're not familiar with this site, so Morse Road is just to the north and just off of the screen grab here, and Cleveland Avenue is just to the west of it. I'm sorry, to the east of it. It's really kind of almost right up in that corner, but also kind of hidden back in the neighborhood. Any other questions on this one? It's a one-story building. The Monroe Building is a 3-level building in the academic core and a 2-story wing through the auditorium core. All right, so the next building is Maderi Elementary School. So there is the very formal front facade to it. There is the backside with the gym addition. And this building was closed in 2007 by the district, and it was the home of Helping Hands Bridgeway up until their new facility opened in 2021. So this is another one of those very small sites, tight urban site, 2.4 acres, and it sits right below Hudson Street and just west of Indianola Avenue.
I was wondering, this used to be a beautiful building, but is this any way of a historical site in Columbus or?
I would say not necessarily by technical definition, like it is not on the register or anything, but certainly from a date of construction, I think it might even be one of our more noteworthy architects who did many school designs back then.
Are any of the, sorry, Chair.
Go ahead, it's open.
Are any of the vacant structures and inactive sites that you're listing right now on the registry, on the historic registry?
No, I believe the district, make sure I get this right. I know the Arcadia building, the Dominion building is on the register. I believe that may be the only one. Indianola, not Indianola Informal, the Indianola Junior High building is on the register, but that is now owned by OSU. I believe that's the only building we have on the register.
West isn't?
West, so somebody has petitioned to bring that forward. It has not gone through to my knowledge. Fort Hays is under a deed restriction and under the supervision of the State Historic Preservation Office, but it is not on the register.
And just what's the significance of that, Alex, if a property is or building is on the register?
Ironically, I don't know that it has a tremendous impact from any legal standpoint. I actually just had this conversation with one of our consultants who really specializes and focuses in that work about the only real restriction it tends to put on properties are that if you're using federal money, there are stipulations that go with what you can or can't do. But in terms of any other restrictions, there really are none. Does that answer the question? I know, I'm
just trying to get more context.
One of those things that people, I don't know, even me tend to fixate on sometimes, but it does sometimes impact what kinds of improvements you can make or dictate the quality of the improvements
That's the state piece, that's the
But in
state
terms of
piece.
what you can do with the building overall, very little impact. All right, so our next site is Pinecrest. And so this is a vacant piece of land only. There is no facility on it whatsoever. So only one picture here. It's just a green space. So I had to do some Googling because it predates probably anybody's time here at the district. As best I can tell, this building was closed in 1980. I don't think the building was open for very many years. You can imagine, I think, with that tail end of the 1970s when enrollment really declined, this is probably a building that closed quickly. It was demolished in my time here back in 2008, and it's just been a vacant site ever since. And again, just for some context, it's just north of East Livingston and just west of South Hamilton Road. Very much in a residential neighborhood, pretty much completely buried in the neighborhood. A little bit of frontage. So that takes us to our active sites. And so we put these sites in a very different bucket because while they do have vacant buildings, the sites are otherwise in use by the district. So the first site is the old Wedgwood Middle School building. So there is the view from Eakin Road. There's a close-up of how the entryway has been kind of gated in. And what's really unique about this one, and I know this one's been misreported in the press, is that, so the overall site is very large on this one. So it's 19.2 acres, but that incorporates everything you see on this site. I do not even understand how it works this way on the auditor's website, because you notice that Eakin Road cuts right through the middle of it. I didn't realize you could have one parcel that's separated by right-of-way, but somehow they let that happen. So when you hear somebody report that it's 19.2 acres, that includes our Eakin Elementary site as well as our new Wedgwood Middle School site. So the yellow arrow is the vacant building, kind of right in the middle of the property, immediately south of Eakin Road. The old Wedgwood building was closed originally in 2008 when the new Wedgwood opened. The building was vacant for a few years, but when segment 3 was kicked off, it became the swing space for Georgian Heights. So if you remember, one of our initiatives with master plan was to have swing sites so that when we needed to fully develop a site and we could not stay on site, in this case it worked really nicely, only about a quarter mile away. So we used this building one time for swing space, and then it's been vacant since 2012 when the new Georgian Heights opened just down the street. Any questions on this one? I will say, well, I don't know that we necessarily dashboarded it publicly. One of our strategies here would be that assuming that we do build a new Eakin Elementary School at some point, that we would demolish the Wedgwood building and put Eakin on the same site so that we would have the ability to have an elementary and a middle school on the same campus. There's plenty of land there that if we wanted to bring other partners into the mix, whether something like a library or a CRPD rec center, police substation, either, any sort of asset that might make sense, that would really work nicely as a campus on this setting.
And this was part of the current facility master planning, the last one we did. We talked about everything Alex just said. Yeah.
Yep, and the other thing is that we wouldn't need swing space. Students could stay in their existing building and we'd build right across the street. So our next vacant building on an active site is Deschler Elementary School. So this site is currently, while it's not in use as a school, it is in use as athletic sites, or as an athletic site for our South High School facility. And this site is relatively large, and it's a little unique in that it's park adjacent as well. So this site is 12.6 acres, and you can see that there is a combined baseball and softball field at the east end of the site, and the Deschler Elementary building kind of hugs a little bit closer to Lockbourne Road. So it's right at the intersection of Lockbourne and East Deschler. This building was closed in 2010, and then upon completion of the South High School project, we used to have baseball and softball on campus, but the reality was the space was not large enough to make them regulation. And so while we had originally placed those at the Barrett site, when that site was sold, they were relocated and a brand new baseball and softball complex was built here for them.
If you haven't been out, these fields are beautiful. They're really nice.
Yeah, it doesn't show up here. We talked about trying to get some aerial footage just because you really can't see it for all the homes around it, other than the fact that the grass is brown because it won't rain. It really is a very nice athletic site for them, especially because there is simply not enough room at the South Campus, nor is there ever going to be. Those baseball, softball field, the outfields are enormous to meet regulation.
And how far is this from South High School, distance-wise?
I believe it's about a half mile.
Okay.
Yeah, a little bit out of really walking range, but it's a quick shuttle ride.
I have a question. Is the building in use? Or are they just using the outside space?
Only outside the building. Yep, no use in the building. And again, the building has deteriorated pretty badly. So the next actively used site is our Linmore Education Center site. And so this site has many uses actually. So it shares a site with our Hamilton STEM building as well as being baseball, softball fields for Lyndon McKinley. So very much like South, while football, track are at main campus, there's not enough room for baseball, softball, and so they were relocated to this site as part of that building's project. The Linmore building is enormous. It's a one-story, I think it was originally a junior high, a middle school when it closed. And there's that overall site plan, so just to kind of get you oriented. So it is Hamilton Avenue immediately to the east of the site. So at the top right corner, you'll see the Hamilton STEM building that we just renovated, not this summer, but summer of '23. The yellow arrow shows the Linmore building that's vacant. And then that kind of light blue cyan arrow shows the Linnmore Annex. So it is a completely separate building. That's the one that CML is leasing right now as their swing space for their North Linden branch project.
The library.
Yep, the library. The Linnmore building itself was closed as a traditional school back in 2007. It became the home of the Global Academy for a couple of years until it was ultimately relocated to what used to be Brookhaven and is now the combined international global site. Yep, and currently under use as swing space, the annex that is. The main building, again, is vacant, deteriorating pretty quickly. And then that takes us to the Franklin Annex. This is another building that I don't know that people necessarily think of too much. It's been closed for many, many years, far before my time here at the district. So it is located on the campus with our girls' prep school. It's kind of on the back side of the site. And so here is the overall layout of that site. So the lower portion of the site is the two-story girls' prep school. There's kind of an alley that dead ends into the site, and at the north side of that is the Franklin Annex. I'm kind of going off base what I can find from our archives because this predates my time here, but I believe this used to be part of a bigger school that was mostly demolished and kept because it had an auditorium. So I think rather than building a new auditorium with the new school, back in I believe the girls' prep school was built in the 70s, I think they kept that building and built the school, and they were just two separate buildings on the same site. The records that I could find show that the site was closed as a district school in 1996. It was leased and operated as the Teresa Dowd School, which I believe closed in 1999. The building's been vacant ever since, as far as I'm aware.
What is the condition of the auditorium that exists on that site?
I think I was in this building about 8 years ago, and I would not have recommended anybody go into it then. Okay. So I'm confident it's very poor.
I think they have chain link fence around there.
It is not chain linked in because I just walked it Monday, but it is boarded. It is fully secured and boarded up.
Yeah, I've been on.
Remember, it's on the same campus as the girls' prep school.
It's not.
And then that takes us to Beery Middle School. And so again, another very large one-story middle school. And it shares a site with our Marion Franklin High School. So again, a very large combined site, 30.6 acres. The Beery Middle School was closed in 2010. CML, the library, moved into the library. They did do a renovation there and completely overhauled that space. I don't know exactly when they started there, but they have been there for many years at this point. But again, they won't be there for that much longer. But again, remember, this is a site that we put into our master plan. And one of the things we're going to have to think about is whether we want to swing to be able to build this site. So it may not be completely ideal, but I think it is completely possible that where you see that yellow arrow, which is the current Beery Middle School, we could build the new high school as a long building that would kind of push into the site, which would allow us to not have to use swing space to be able to execute on this site.
So, Marion Franklin? What new high school?
It's in the facility master plan. It would not be Marion Franklin. It would be a new high school that would be larger. Normal size for Ohio standards, but larger for Columbus City School standards. And it would be a regional high school.
Right.
How many acres did you say that one is?
This site is 30.6 acres.
Yep, this is an opportunity to create mega campus, much like what we see at Afrocentric.
Yeah.
This is the opportunity for that same model.
And that completes the presentation.
So we don't have hundreds of properties that are vacant. We do have some, and we have some that are currently leased, that are coming off leases. And we have some that, we definitely, this committee will talk more about and make recommendations to the board about. We will have more discussion about demolitions at our next meeting, kind of working through that process and trying to understand, the current conditions of some of these buildings because they are unsafe. while we figure out what to do with land as it, kind of intertwines with our academic vision and community needs. Are there any questions just now more holistically or kind of now looking at everything we have that the committee has on our vacant, leased, and unused spaces?
Are there any properties that we have sold as of recently that maybe would have appeared on one of these lists in the last 5 years, 10 years?
The old Mohawk building, the old Mohawk school that was Afrocentric.
Yes.
Mohawk we've sold.
To Children's Hospital. It's part of the new campus of Children's Hospital.
There's going to be a handful in the 5-year time frame. There are going
There
to be
will be.
a lot in the 10-year time frame. I don't have that in front of me, but I know we do have a list of them.
We can bring that back and just look at sales. That can be, something that we can look at.
Just to have a concept, it's more just I want the concept of how much of our vacant property blueprint we've actually offloaded in recent years.
So just for clarity, your question was around like properties that we've already sold.
Transferred,
not
sold, yeah.
properties that have potential for sale.
Correct.
And I'm assuming, I just want to make sure we pull the right data. Like, you're not looking for small things like right-of-way transfer, like you're looking for whole property sales.
South Korea Center, the old Mohawk / Afrocentric. There were a few others.
Wasn't it Brittenell? Did we sell Brittenell to the Charles School or that whole conglomerate?
I believe that's
I think we
correct.
did.
Just to make sure I pull the right data, do we want to go with 10 years?
Yeah, 10 years is fine.
Okay.
At this point, it's conceptual, but it may be relevant.
And I just want to say, like, right now, I think that that our current board has a different philosophy about going into property sales, again, that I kind of started this whole conversation off with. And so, again, making sure that we're keeping and maintaining assets that not only support our academic vision, but I think we're very interested in the potential of revenue generation from our assets. So that's a little bit of a newer take by this board. So we aren't, I think you said offload, that is the wrong term. That's not the way we want to talk about our assets. And so each one of these assets are incredibly important. The value of the land that we hold in the inner city is incredibly important to us as well as the community. And so making sure that, we're doing the right things with it by our district and our students and community. Well, if there's no questions, we are going to keep obviously talking about this. Once we, we're going to hear more about the bigger plan in general. And we're going to be talking about, like I said, some of a demolition type process and looking at some of these properties, eventually making some recommendations to the board. Hopefully this year to, start getting started to get some of these really dangerous buildings offline.
I have one more clarifying question, if that's okay, Chair. Do we have any of the properties that you listed in the CCS vacant properties? Are any of those for sale currently?
No properties for sale.
I didn't think so, but I just wanted to clarify.
No, the board has not put any properties up for sale.
Not for sale at all.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify.
Yeah. All right, excellent. Well, let's go ahead and move into item 4.2. So totally switching gears. That's the beauty of this committee. We're gonna talk now more about money, like hard money, cash money. In terms of revenue coming into the district and specifically reimbursement on Medicaid expenses. I'm going to start with our internal auditor, who actually his committee last year started this work, and so now we're kind of going to adopt that. So we need a kind of a level set on where we are and kind of the things that you looked at last year, and I know we have some staff too to help with this presentation.
Yes. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
We're here to provide you with information regarding the Medicaid Schools Program. We'd like to review some background information, highlight some successes, opportunities, and risk mitigation, and discuss why this topic's relevant to the committee. So first, I'd like to define internal auditing, just so you understand why we're involved in the process. So We're an independent, objective assurance and consulting activity designed to add value and improve an organization's operations. It helps an organization accomplish its objectives by bringing a systematic, disciplined approach to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of risk management, control, and governance processes. So the Medicaid project, the objective was to examine various documents, processes that maximize our Medicaid reimbursement potential within CCS offices and departments, evaluate how our reimbursements compare to other school districts, and research other ways to enhance Medicaid reimbursements. So this aligns to the ETRM committee by examining the background and purpose of the committee charter. And this states in part, the ETRM committee shall assist the board through guidance and counsel on matters of many things, but that includes opportunities and risk mitigation. Also to promote the equitable allocation of resources with fidelity, and to promote the adequacy and effectiveness of the district's internal audit environments. So this presentation will provide background information, and again, I just want to say it highlights successes, opportunities, and risk mitigation, as well as the adequacy and effectiveness of the internal control environment. We've previously presented this information to audit and accountability, as Chair Dare said, in May of 2022, when we went over our original project results. We also did a refresh in January of 2024 to give an update on where we stood on some of the recommendations that were made. So this presentation will be a refresh of January 2024 because some enhancements have been made since then. I'd like to introduce Dr. Mickey Nelson, Executive Director of Accelerated and Extended Learning, right there. The Medicaid Schools program is part of her organizational structure. And Dr. Robin Floyd, the Medicaid and Psychological Services Manager. So Dr. Floyd, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank the committee for this opportunity to share information concerning the Medicaid school program with the Columbus City School District, and to Dr. Mickey Nelson for her continued support with me on this work. Prior to getting started, I would like to direct your attention to the handouts that were provided. On the second page, there's a list of definitions that you can refer to, because as you know, in education, we talk in acronyms and alphabet soup. So just want to make sure that you have some reference information and definitions that go along with it, as well as the corresponding formula used for the reimbursement, which is on the flip side on the back on the bottom. By the end of this presentation, it is my hope that you will have a better understanding of what the school Medicaid program is and how it relies on Medicaid insurance eligibility. Today, I will be sharing an overview of the Medicaid school program. Trying to do two forwards, so bear with me. Highlight the, here we go, hold on. Highlight the Columbus City Schools project objectives that began 7 years ago, as Mr. O'Connor mentioned. Present additional school Medicaid information from frequently asked questions about the program. Share Columbus City Schools' leadership and advocacy in support of expanding reimbursement services for the district and our state. Provide updates and a timeline from the Ohio Department of Medicaid stakeholder meeting held in July of this year, and convey how the program can support the Whole Child Initiative. Please, again, make note of the formula at the bottom, as I'll be referring to it, and that this formula does drive the program. Background information. The Medicaid school program supports federal compliance with the Individuals with Disability Act, or IDEA, where schools are obligated to provide services to students with disabilities and is designed to offset the cost of medically related services served within our schools. Ohio currently has approximately 650 school districts participating in the program. The Medicaid school program has two advantages. One, to achieve educational goals, and two, that the district gets reimbursement funds for providing services with financial support. The Ohio Department of Medicaid partners with the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce and local education agencies to provide healthcare services for approximately 125,000 disabled students annually. Participating districts received over $41 million in fiscal year 21 and approximately $48 million in fiscal year 22, whereas Columbus City Schools averaged over $5 million both years. I do want to make a side note that this information was taken directly from the Ohio Department of Medicaid's stakeholder meeting that was recently provided. I did double check with them and they said that that was an error by about $100 million. It was a typo. So I am quoting the exact information from that presentation. However, please know that they do pay out more dollars.
I have a question.
Yes.
The breakdown, does it include staff that need to be hired to service the students out of that 5 million? Who does the breakdown?
If you bear with me, and actually on that second handout, there's a projection, a 5-year projection of money that has been reimbursed to the district, and I'll kind of go over each point, which does include staff that we have, but not necessarily potential staff that we need.
Thank you.
It is important to note that reimbursements are typically 2 years behind the current year after federal and state audits have been completed and satisfied. So we're, as they say, 2 years in the rears. Yes?
I heard you say that there's a typo in the amount of total funds that they give out based on the information that they gave. Is the information about the 5 million-ish that Columbus City Schools receives correct? Is that correct?
We're correct.
Okay.
ODM received, participating districts in the state of Ohio received over $147 and some odd million in fiscal year 21, and they're doing a double check for fiscal year 22. So in their future presentations, they will be providing that dollar amount, and I will update and revise this information once it becomes public. General project objectives for Columbus City Schools. Having awareness of the potential for additional revenue for the district, project objectives were developed and created in 2017 to address the question asked from our internal audit department concerning why a similar school district was receiving more Medicaid reimbursements than Columbus City Schools. This project, as Mr. O'Connor mentioned, focused on 3 main objectives concerning student support staff. 1, to learn and understand more about Medicaid reimbursements compared to other districts. 2, research ways to enhance reimbursements through staff trainings and the importance of parental consent. And 3, build relationships across multiple departments such as student support services, budgeting, internal audit, transportation, nursing services, and our third-party vendor to collaborate, learn, and share more about the program to maximize our reimbursement potential. For example, through departmental discussions, our focus group learned that a parent must provide written consent. And once obtained, the consent is valid for the duration of the services provided until they graduate. Having consent authorizes districts to share service information with Medicaid for partial reimbursement to the district.
Do you have a question?
Yes.
Does the student's Medicaid eligibility come into play here? Or if they have an IEP or a 504 plan, does a student have to be Medicaid eligible outside of Columbus City Schools in order for the school system to receive reimbursement for
Yes.
them? Okay.
Yes, that is part of the formula. And I'll kind of touch a little bit more on that as we go along.
Does the student receiving or the parent signing off on the Medicare consent form affect the family's income and tax situation in any sort of way?
Not at all. Thank you. That's a great question. Since information concerning the Medicaid school programs may be new to many, I'd like to take a moment to share additional qualifiers for reimbursement to school districts by sharing frequently asked questions and answers to learn more about the program. If you've noticed, I only have the question on your handout because I would like for you to kind of consider and think about the answers to the questions asked. All right, first question. Does the district need written consent to bill Medicaid?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Pardon?
From the parent.
From the parent, yes. School districts are required to obtain written consent from parents or legal guardians to bill for services provided. The annual notification provides an explanation to parents their rights relating to IDEA content. Okay, consider this. Oh, I haven't forwarded. My apologies. I forwarded on my screen. There we go. Okay, I'm caught up. If consent is not provided to release information to Medicaid for billing, will this affect the services that children receive at school?
No.
It shouldn't.
No.
Ideally, no.
But
No.
it does.
No.
Okay. Let's see. Nope. If you do not provide consent for release of information and Medicaid reimbursement, it will not affect the services the children receive at school. All services documented within the IEP will be provided regardless of parental consent. How many people have heard the term unfunded mandates? Okay, keep that in mind.
And in this instance, if I can just quickly, in this instance particularly, it's incredibly underfunded by Congress. So for those who really don't understand that, in 1975, when IDEA was created, they committed to a 40% appropriation. They have never met that in nearly 50 years of its history. They've never met that appropriation amount. This year, the amount is about 10.7, 10.8% appropriation. So for those of us who are paying attention to, conversations about Congress shutting down, conversations about, candidates and campaigns, please be listening out for exactly how something like this that is fundamental to a significant portion of population of our students. Have your ears open and just be paying attention to this, and let's write some of our officials about our concern around fair funding and appropriate funding of IDEA. I had this conversation with Congresswoman Amelia Sykes yesterday.
That's timely.
I have a question. Is this a national issue or is this an Ohio?
This is a national issue. A national issue.
Thank you. It's right on time.
Mr. Cole is chair of our community advocacy committee, so this encouraging us to do some advocacy. Thank you, Chair Cole. On that.
Great, awesome. We might be working together down the road. This question relates to the types of services provided. I ask that you reflect on what services could be provided with an IEP and reimbursable in the Medicaid school program. Just kind of give that some thought.
Do you want us to answer that, or?
Nah.
Okay.
I'm not going to call on you for that. The 5 related service areas covered for reimbursement are psychology, speech and language pathology, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and nursing services. The program includes additional related services. However, they are only applicable for ETR and IEP documented services. So it has to be on the IEP in order for us to even consider claiming for reimbursement. The next question will relate to private services, and I believe that was already asked. Are services provided by private therapists impacted by Medicaid school health service claims?
No.
Nope. The Columbus City School District services will not impact services received outside of school, insurance benefits or premiums, payments for health services covered by the state, or participation in community-based programs. Okay, with that thought in mind, I will now transition to asking questions related to reimbursements and payments.
Okay, excuse me. One?
Yes.
The TANF form, have you heard of that? The TANF form?
I have not.
TANIF. It was a plan, I thought it was Columbus City Schools. What year? Where students, parents would fill this out and they would be able to get services. And many of the parents did not fill it out because they thought it affected what they were getting at home.
Okay.
It's called the TANF.
TANF, yeah, is another program.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is not involved, okay.
No, but that fear, I think what you're talking about is very real, like, because they don't want things to impact their Medicaid because, people get, taken off Medicaid.
Right. Thank you for asking that. I'm going to make note of that for future reference and look into it.
Yeah, it's
Temporary assistance. Yep.
Part of, okay.
A lot of my a lot of after-school kids use those dollars.
Okay,
Summer and after
I am
school.
familiar with that, with the Medicaid proper insurance returns, because we did some partnership with Franklin County Jobs and Family Services, and they did share a little bit of background in terms of how we might be able to get more involved with community partnerships. I'll kind of reference that a little bit along the way. The next question, can our district get Medicaid reimbursements for 504 plan services? How many people have heard of 504 plans?
Yeah, I've heard about it.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah,
You
we have
think
a
we
lot
get
of-
reimbursed for it?
No.
I didn't think we could, but.
No.
You're right, we do not. 504 services cannot be billed under the current Ohio Medicaid school program. Only ETR testing and IEP direct services are billable under the Medicaid school program. Next is the last question to consider, how reimbursements are spent by school districts. So give that a little bit of thought. How is reimbursement revenue currently spent by the school district? Anyone know?
I would say maybe supplies, payment to professional development, people who are professional development and go into that role, which is greatly needed. I don't think it's advertised.
Right.
It should be,
Right.
but those things.
I like where you're going with that.
But it's Title II she's talking about.
These federal and state reimbursements become part of Columbus City Schools' general fund.
asking which fund would it go into?
The Medicaid partial reimbursement is utilized for supporting student access to curriculum instruction, child find activities, and other related services provided within special education programs. I like where you're going with training and development. I'll look into that.
Yeah, please do. 'Cause we're at a deficit right now with individuals in that area.
Okay, now I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about the advocacy that Columbus City Schools has been involved in. Over the course of 3 years, Columbus City Schools has participated in stakeholder engagement meetings beginning with a few participants and growing to include additional members, such as the Children's Defense Fund.
Oh, yeah.
Columbus City Schools is recognized and acknowledged for creating and leading these monthly group discussions that allows local education agencies to be a voice in advocating for expanded school-based services, having the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce and the Ohio Department of Medicaid in attendance at all of our meetings. The vision and the mission shown here of the steering committee that highlights involved advocacy efforts for acquiring the maximum resources for students to enhance the whole child vision adopted by ODEW.
Yeah.
Michael?
Dr. Floyd, can we include in that piece that advocacy not only extends in that space, but also to federal government and the state? So we are part, as the Board of Education, we are part of national consortiums. For example, the Consortium of State School Board Associations that participate and work in advocacy for IDEA, E-rate, any myriad of things that we use to have direct services provided for students to have access to curriculum and all the other things. So this is not only just in the local space with local partners, important local partners that also have a national presence.
Yes.
But this is also our work in legislative advocacy in the federal government with Congress and the President's administration, as well as the governor and our General Assembly.
Yes. Absolutely. Thank you. On this slide, you can see that we have Columbus City Schools, Cleveland Metropolitan School District, Cincinnati Public Schools, the Ohio School Health Services Association, ODEW, the RMTS vendor, which is Random Moment Time Study. Their name is Civic Solution. It used to be UMass, that if some of you are familiar with that program. The Ohio Department of Medicaid, Community Advocates, and our third-party vendor, in addition to other third-party vendors that service other school districts in the state. Discussions, achievements, and accomplishments were made by 5 points of interest. Number 1, creating a collaborative platform to have authentic discussions about risks, gaps, and opportunities to expand the Medicaid school program in Ohio. 2, discussing how expanded reimbursement services could be helpful to schools already providing mandatory services. 3, interfacing with the state's Random Moment Time Study vendor directly as a part of our discussion group to review and understand appropriate documentation compliance by examining the percentage rate formula that is utilized in the cost report to consider what types of proposed health management services in the future could be school billable services. 4, learning from our third-party vendors about cost reports, interim claims, and how final settlements are determined by ODEW and ODM. And 5, sharing the importance of attending the national, and I welcome any of you, I'll send you the link, the annual National Alliance for Medicaid in Education Conference. It will be in Denver this year, October 15th through the 18th, to better understand rules and regulations set by the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid. And the acronym for that is CMS, that everyone says, CMS rules, CMS super guide, regarding school-based expansions, state grants, initiatives developed in other school districts, and states developing a network base to collaborate and see various action plans already implemented and in place. The next slide focuses on Columbus City Schools' project engagement efforts that are directly connected to final settlement data. Now, there is a handout that corresponds with that. It's kind of light and faint. Every single time I copied it, it just automatically created this copy. So bear with me. There's a handout that corresponds with this. This slide is reflective of the, this slide is given to us by our third-party vendor, HBS, or Healthcare Billing Services. They provided a breakdown of total reimbursements for the past 5 years based on the following factors. And the reason I chose 5 years because it's 5 years with 2 years in the rears of our project being involved in asking these questions. Those following factors include.
It's like at the
It's a
end
separate
of the packet,
page.
it looks like.
Yeah, it's a separate page.
Okay. It's behind the definition.
Behind the definition page.
You got it? Okay, perfect. Those factors are the Medicaid eligibility rate, that is the current Medicaid student enrollment percentage, random moment time studies, that involves related service personnel who participate quarterly to document how much time they spend on various student-related service activities, interim payments that are based on individual documented therapy services claims that are processed and paid in monthly increments, allowable cost. They are the salary and benefit cost of related service personnel, the contracted cost with our third-party vendor, and indirect cost associated with the offices of the treasurer, human resources, operations, and other administrative business support offices. And this results in the final settlements that is based on the cost report. In other words, the Medicaid school program reimbursement total is the sum of interim claims and final settlements. Some people kind of look at the final settlement and think that that's the total. It's a combination because they get, we get reimbursed along the way. So this next slide is a visual that shows a positive reimbursement trajectory for the district due to the project focus that was mentioned earlier. As you can see in fiscal year 23, projections are reflective of the work and the collaborative efforts from engagement, trainings, and advocacy efforts. As a result of discussions and inquiries generated during steering committee meetings, our third-party vendor discovered an error in the fiscal year 22 cost report that resulted in an adjudicated additional funds to the district, along with communications with the state's new RMTS vendor by challenging the status quo, resulting in an increased percentage from 36% to 49% within that formula that increased our projected revenue for the district by $2 million. However, continued discussions are still needed to better understand the changes concerning expanded services and how it could positively or negatively affect future reimbursements for the district. Since COVID, we have been trending in an upward trajectory. However, we cannot depend on continued increases without continuous monitoring and oversight. Proposed updates to the Medicaid school program most certainly ties in well with the whole child focus, as supported by House Bill 33, in support of the governor's initiatives to assist schools as highlighted within the Ohio Department's school health landscape, shown here, where it highlights healthy students, student wellness, school-based health centers, Medicaid providers, services in schools, telehealth, and the Medicaid school program. Next, I will share proposed additions to the Medicaid school program compared to what is eligible and what Columbus City Schools currently claims for reimbursement. This chart shows all the services that are reimbursable, what Columbus City Schools gets reimbursed for, and newly proposed additions communicated from the Ohio Department of Medicaid. The additions proposed include 504 plans, health management for chronic conditions such as asthma and diabetic care, behavioral health to include the child and adolescent's needs and strengths communication tool, or CANS, that you will see abbreviated quite frequently, that is used to support decision-making involving the school environment, trauma, mental health needs, and risk behaviors. Displayed here is a visual of the Medicaid school program implementation timeline from the Ohio Department of Medicaid's July 2024 stakeholder meeting. As highlighted in this timeline, Columbus City Schools has participated in multiple stakeholder meetings and had the opportunity to provide information and feedback from a school district perspective, where the expansion of billable services is currently scheduled to be finalized by the end of this school year. It's coming up fast. As mentioned before, the Medicaid school program that supports school-based services ties in well with the whole child focus. It's a theme here. This ties in by helping eligible students enroll in the Medicaid insurance program, or We Can Help, connecting students' Medicaid eligible family members with Medicaid health coverage to support wellness plans, providing Medicaid covered health services in schools and seeking payment for eligible services, continue offering Medicaid covered services that support at-risk Medicaid eligible students being served on an IEP, providing Medicaid covered services that reduces emergency room visits to promote preventative care and supports to students, and providing Medicaid cover services and performing Medicaid administrative activities that promote student wellness, healthy environments, and learning opportunities. In other words, healthy students and families could and can improve student attendance at school. However, unwinding Medicaid coverage for children could potentially have an adverse effect on the whole child focus. So, what does Medicaid unwinding mean to us? During the public health emergency, states were prohibited from disenrolling people from Medicaid supported services. However, in March 2023, sorry about that, states began disenrolling those who did not complete the renewal process. Ohio began disenrolling May 11th, 2023, leaving many uninsured for health and wellness benefits. The good news is that Columbus City Schools is well positioned to be a resource base for families to address the need for enrollments and renewals, and can be of assistance to students and families to obtain insurance coverage with formed community partnerships. This assistance could have a positive effect for the district, especially since the eligibility rate is one factor in the reimbursement formula that could maximize our revenue potential. We could do everything right. If they are not actively enrolled in Medicaid and receive that insurance and those benefits, no reimbursement. So, Next, I would like to share 3 general questions commonly asked about Medicaid unwinding, what we know, and what to expect. Remains to be seen and understood. Okay, the first question. What do we know about the changes in Medicaid enrollment so far during the unwinding? I'll give you the answer. Medicaid enrollment has declined by about 10% across states since the start of unwinding. That's a short amount of time. Secondly, where will Medicaid enrollment wind up at the end of unwinding? We are unsure of the adverse effects at this time. Thirdly, what will happen to coverage more broadly? While changes in Medicaid enrollment are important, those numbers will matter less than what happens to the number of people who are uninsured. In closing, I would like to share quotes from the Office of Civil Rights, who enforces Section 504 plans and is in support of expanded Medicaid eligible services and insurance for all students. The quotes highlighted that I will show you in just a moment are from an ERIC publication discussing education and the impacts of COVID-19 on America's students. First one. Tragic impacts on individuals, families, and communities appears to be deepening divides in educational opportunity across our nation's classrooms and campuses. We have a rare moment as a country to take stock and begin the hard work of building our schools back better and stronger, with a resolve necessary to ensure that our nation's schools are defined not by disparities, but by equity and opportunity for all students. This is not just about students with disabilities. This is about all students. It is my hope that you now have a better understanding of what the school Medicaid program is, that there is a project focus in place to promote advocacy and increased revenue, have an awareness of the program's expansions and timelines, and how this is connected to promoting health and wellness in support of the whole child focus. I would like to conclude with one final thought. How is Columbus City Schools preparing for Medicaid expansion? Well, Columbus City Schools is gearing up for the 25-26 school year by meeting in September, which is this month of this year, to level set internal stakeholder groups, increasing staff awareness and understanding about the Medicaid school program, establishing a timeline to stay the course and be ready for the anticipated expansion, providing training and development for existing and expanded personnel from the proposed expansions, because we'll be adding a new group of people, outline activities needed for participants and billing changes, having continued involvement with the steering committee, and work with community partners and family engagement to be a resource in support of continued Medicaid coverage for our students and families. I recognize that this is quite a bit of information to process, and have included resourced hyperlinks on the next 2 pages associated with information presented that can be found on our next slides. Absolutely.
Good evening. I'm Mickey Nelson. I'm the Executive Director for Special Education. And the question that was asked is, the types of students that we serve. When we talk about special education, obviously it covers a broad range of our student population. We're currently, the information that Robin shared was a couple of years old regarding our numbers. We're currently up to about 9,800 students that are identified with disabilities here in in our district. Those disabilities range from what we call kind of our mild moderate category, so our students with specific learning disabilities, our students that maybe have the category of other health impairment, which includes our students that have significant health concerns or attention deficit. It also includes our students that have multiple disabilities. These are our students that have very complex needs that are related to lower cognitive ability, limited communication. Sometimes those students have very challenging physical disabilities. They're wheelchair bound, non-ambulatory. We are also seeing, as a part of the pandemic and a part of what's going on nationally, a huge increase in the number of students that are identified under the category of autism. Autism is our third highest category of prevalence in terms of those students that are identified. And what we're seeing with those students, as you are familiar with that category of autism, it is a spectrum, and a lot of our students are on the more challenging part of the spectrum with multiple needs requiring a great deal of service. So our Medicaid to School program is, to piggyback on what Board Member Cole said, paramount to ensuring that we can provide optimal services for our students beyond what even the IEP says, but just making sure that our students are safe on a daily basis, making sure that they have access to general education, and all the other things that makes Columbus City Schools an amazing district to be in. So,
thank you. Before we open it up to questions, I think that for our committee, just kind of coming back to what our auditor kind of started, the reason why this is a good kind of discussion and learning opportunity is regardless, we are going to support these students. And the question is, where does the money come from to pay for the things that these students need? And so this presentation is important, and what we learned was that we were leaving money on the table that is available to the district through the Medicaid program. And so the work of you and the consortium to kind of talk about all of this has increased the revenue we have brought in, but we know we have work to do because there are still opportunities for us to increase the amount of money we are getting that is available to us. And so as we talk about, how much it costs to educate a child, as we talk about equitable budgeting, the more that we can get reimbursed for services that are out there means the more general fund dollars we have and frees up dollars to do other things. And so that's why this kind of discussion in this committee is really important. And, she said question us. I asked the question to Catherine via text because I wanted that student perspective brought in because it's incredibly important that we understand the complex needs of students all the way to, what some may traditionally think of as an IEP. And our district, over 9,000 students is huge. And we know that we serve students from other districts as well because of the great work we do and the specialization that we have in Columbus City Schools. And so, again, just kind of bringing that all back together about why, again, we're having this discussion here, but also making sure that we're tying in our students. Board Member Cole has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this presentation.
Absolutely.
I applaud all of your work, most definitely. Mr. O'Connor, I thank you for giving us a focus and creating a realm space for us to dialogue and learn more and then pursue more, as you stated. And I really appreciate also Treasurer Cook, because when we interviewed you for the role, this was one of those gap spaces that you directly alluded to. So I know that this is a special place for you as well.
It is, and I think it's key. I think Chairwoman Adair pointed out, we're going to provide these services as a district regardless. This is a reimbursement component that we really need to lean into, focus on, and maximize, because again, we're just going to reinvest those dollars. The needs, I think it was mentioned, they're not shrinking, they're not going away. How do we come together as a district and maximize these resources so that we continue to develop in an equitable manner those resources for students moving forward? So thank you.
Yes, sir. I had a question, actually two. The first is, are we including this Medicaid expansion in our enrollment initiative? Is this a part of our enrollment? So when families actually come down to the Fort Hays campus and enroll their students, is some section of this, there are multiple forms that we actually condensed to be electronic. Years ago, we did that. But is this a part of the enrollment process in any way?
Dr. Klein has provided a flyer for families to remind them, but we aren't actively engaged. She is interested in doing more.
Okay, I'd love to see where you all can think through that space for us to include this in the enrollment process so it's easily captured. The other question is about our emotionally disabled students. And you mentioned students with complex needs. I just want to make sure, is that enclave of students also included in this population?
In this
For the
current
Medicaid
population
program.
or the expanded one?
For the expansion piece.
So there are 13 eligibility categories
Mm-hmm.
for special education.
Yep.
Serious emotional disturbance is one of those 13. The difference in the Medicaid expansion part of this is that we will have students potentially that we can bill for services that don't need to be qualified under an IEP. So they might be a student that has a social maladjustment and is receiving a lot of social emotional support through a 504 plan. So that's kind of the difference in, to qualify for IEP services, it is a criteria-based qualification system based on federal law under those 13 categories. The Medicaid expansion allows us to broaden those activities and those services to students who might not be eligible under 50 or under IDEA, but are receiving those necessary services and supports, including our students that obviously have serious emotional disturbances, but also our students that have significant mental health needs that maybe don't qualify for special ed.
Thank you.
Does that help to clarify?
It does. There's such a deep complexity to it because there's a difficulty in schools having the time and resources to be able to actually evaluate a student who may have an emotional disability, who may have that in place, and that's why they are often diverted to 504.
Yes.
But that's why I asked the question, are we looking at including them because they still qualify for those psychological reimbursable
Yes.
dollars?
Absolutely, and that would be something that as we're looking and we're gearing up, we're starting this work this year to address some, like your previous question about how can we enroll families right from the get-go, that is part of that key stakeholder group that we're going to be meeting internally now here in CCS to make sure that we are broadening all of our reach and making sure that we're not missing anything and we are capitalizing on that reimbursement potential as it relates to students who will be served really under any plan that we have available to us through 504, healthcare plans, as Robin said, and IEPs.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so with that said, are we routing these students to schools that has the personnel, trained personnel, to take care of their needs?
That's a great question. So we have different schools that provide different services. So for example, one of our, to piggyback on Chairman Adair, we have our CHIP program, which is primarily housed at Huey Elementary School for elementary students. So yes, students that have hearing impairments that need that level of service, we provide that service at Huey. But I want to clarify that we also serve students with hearing impairments throughout our district.
Correct.
So there are students that have hearing impairments that don't need all the services at Huey. To highlight our students with behavioral challenges, We have our Columbus Scioto, and our Beatty Park program, but not every student that qualifies for IEP services have to go there. That's where that individualization comes in with the IEP team to determine where those students' needs can best be met. So yes, we have certain programs, Coleraine, Beechcroft, Ames, another perfect example of where we have a lot of services built into one location, but we serve students with varying disability categories throughout our district based on the severity of their needs and what that school can provide on site.
Okay, I have another question with that. I don't want to monopolize this whole thing. So we have a new unit. I'm just going to bring it out. Mifflin High School.
Yes.
MD.
Yes.
Who's in charge of making sure that the person that's in the classroom is trained, updated with all this, certified to teach their students?
I'm going to modify her question. Not that it's not incredibly important, but it's actually the work of our academic alignment committee. That's the work that they need to dig into. But I think maybe your question about maybe on the ground, like how are the staff members working with families to let them know about the Medicaid student program might be something that they can address here. But that right there, because we know academically the way that we're doing services for our special education population, we do need to look at and ask the question, is this being done in an equitable way, in a way that we want the best practices? And that's something that the academic committee will be digging into. So I don't want to get us, it's incredibly important, not quite the work of this committee. So I want to kind of refocus on this.
Okay.
So we, as Dr. Floyd said, we provide parents with their annual notice of the Medicaid to School program at the IEP meeting. So IEPs have to be reviewed annually by federal and state regulation. So that is when when we do that initial IEP, we give them that initial enrollment and have them sign, and then every year we give them that annual notification, and that's what Dr. Floyd mentioned previously in her presentation. In terms of how we cascade this information to other stakeholder groups, we do have annual training for our related service staff in terms of how they bill. We provide training for new staff. That's our third-party vendor provides a lot of that training in terms of the nuances of how you bill, how you go into the system, documentation. And then we use that documentation for two purposes, obviously for Medicaid to school billing, but then we also use it for IEP progress notification and writing that annual IEP. So that's kind of how we get that information out to, and then we have opportunities, Mr. O'Connor and Dr. Floyd have opportunities to speak to various community members, the Board of Ed, our team, our executive leadership team. So that's kind of how we cascade the information to kind of be more pervasive throughout the district.
Thank you. Real quick, while you put this slide up in here, we have some things that look like they are eligible, but we are not seeking reimbursement for them. Can you maybe explain why we are not seeking?
Absolutely. When you look over here with counseling, as I briefly stated, and it kind of did like an overview, it has to be at this time a related service that is on the IEP. Counseling services are not on the IEP, but in many cases they're on a 504 plan. The same with social work, and the reason that we aren't billing for transportation at this time has to do with the pandemic, the shortage of bus drivers. It has to be a separate route that only has IEP students on that particular bus. We've had to combine routes. Therefore, we aren't able to do this. Our third-party vendor did a lot of training. Mr. O'Connor assisted me with that training. We did manual checklists. We dove into Tyler Drive to see how we could streamline that.
I also want to point out, to bill for transportation, the student has to also receive a service that day to receive that transportation. So it's not, even if we do all those other checks and we have a dedicated route, in order to get billed, in order to receive that reimbursement for transportation, the student would have to receive speech services or OT services or PT services. So that transportation becomes very nuanced in terms of the billing portion of that, the reimbursement portion of that.
Thank you. Are there additional questions? Thank you both. Auditor O'Connor, any last words you'd like to say on this?
No, I just wanted to thank Dr. Nelson and Dr. Floyd for all their assistance with this.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, thank you.
Team Everett.
That was a lot.
Thank you.
Again, many thanks for your time and the opportunity to share this information with you, because this project is very near and dear to my heart. It's kind of that side thing that I've done in addition to my current responsibilities, because I really believe in doing everything that I can to support our students, as well as the group of people that were on the steering committee believe that same thing. So we definitely appreciate this time, and I hope the takeaway is there is a direct connection to Medicaid eligibility in order for us to be reimbursed, and we do have an opportunity to be able to do something about that in support of our families. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, we're going to transition over into item 4.3, which will be just something that we regularly do each month to hear about our district finances. So I know we are like short on time.
We'll go high level
We're going to
here.
go high level today just to introduce you to the report, and I'll turn it over to Treasurer Cook.
Thank you. Good evening. I know that was a tremendous amount to digest this evening when we talk about property and our resources, and then the expenses with students and Medicaid, and then the reimbursement. The bottom line is this all kind of flows into what we do when we talk about equity and resources with our students. So my office has designed a monthly report for this committee that will allow us to keep a handle on our revenue and our expenses. Next month, we're going to talk about the 5-year forecast, which is really going to drive a lot of key decisions by the administration and the board. So this will begin to roll up into that, and I promise you, make more sense month to month as we talk about it. I would encourage you, as you review this, just to look at the first couple slides, the financial overview month to date, and then fiscal to date. 1 month does not a trend make. However, it is good information for us to look at how are we performing as a district, revenue versus expenses. As the year progresses, things will smooth out. The blips, the hiccups will hopefully flatline. And this, again, will make a lot more sense next month when I talk about fiscal years. So we're going to see a month-to-month and have a brief discussion every month of how we're doing. We'll compare it to fiscal year, and then a minimum of twice a year, we're going to have a pretty heavy conversation around the 5-year forecast. Again, I think as I look at the month, revenue, we were up $10 million. Expenditures, we were under 12.2. So great month, but what does that really mean as the year progresses? How does that impact services, et cetera? So again, I understand you got hit with a tremendous amount tonight, but the key is really dive in and look at that month performance, that fiscal year performance, and then there are some slides behind that that really dive a little bit deeper for us as a committee into that data that you're seeing reflected there. I would be remiss if I didn't highlight there is a sheet dedicated to our personnel expenditures, salaries and benefits. As we talk about anything as a district from a fiscal standpoint, that is approximately 85% of our budget. So really, as we discuss decisions and equity with budgeting, et cetera, and impacting that classroom, it comes down to people. So again, that needs to be a focus as we move forward.
Can you just really quickly talk about when we say plan versus actual and what that kind of means, you know, it may be more like looking at your own personal kind of.
Yeah, let's think about that as a budget. We've got X number of dollars we're anticipating coming in as a fiscal department that we're looking to receive. We have that data here, again, month to date and fiscally, but we've got our plan, which is what we're anticipating, and then what did we actually get from all of our revenue sources, state, local, federal. Again, it's a metric that we like to look to because, again, these details matter when we talk about that holistic view of our spending plan, which is the 5-year forecast next month. We've spent a tremendous amount of time the last several weeks really diving in. How do we compare to plan? What are the percentages we've seen in the past? How do we bake this cake as we look forward into future fiscal years, not only with this one? So again, it's much like you would hopefully do at home. You're anticipating an income of X, you're anticipating expenses of Y. Here's where I think we're going to be for that month. And again, this is all based on historical averages that we have seen.
So we will get, we will keep looking at these. And
Yes.
so making sure that you understand them as, you know, obviously, because as we have bigger conversations about revenue generation and we're talking about unrestricted money, and then we haven't, and, you know, we're going to talk about, you know, equitable budgeting, which then we'll talk about kind of also like the human capital side of that. And so we felt that this was important each month to make sure that the committee had, because this is it. This is what the documentation is on paper. And
It
so-
drives everything we do as a district.
Yep.
And don't be afraid, if you have questions, feel free as you walk away tonight from things to reach out to me. I'll be happy to answer them. There, again, a lot to digest and process, but this is the nuts and bolts fiscally of what the board sees then every month rolled up to their report.
All right, are there any questions? Okay, I know this was a jam-packed meeting. Again, we have another meeting in a month, and we will, you know, be continuing to talk about these very important issues around the district resources, including property and just money. So I want to thank everyone's attendance tonight. And if you have questions as you review the material, like Treasurer Cook said, please do not hesitate to reach out. Your voices are so important to us, and we want to make sure that you know that you can ask questions at any time. So all we need to finish up is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And with that, without objection, we are adjourned.